Thank you so much for coming. And before I start to talk about Wojciech Bobowski, very interesting polymath of 17th century, I would like to thank Special Collections team for having me here as a visiting fellow. It was special 2 months. It was a pleasure to meet you all, see you working and spend time in this beautiful rooms, but also in this wonderful community. So thank you so much. And now to my protagonist, Wojciech Bobowski. He was born around 1610 in Lviv, now Ukraine, back then Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And he's an amazing personality of Polish, Ottoman Turkish contacts in the 17th century, who is totally forgotten in Poland. This is why I started to research his biography and his multitude of works. And he's best known nowadays under his Turkish name, Ufki, in Turkey. And he is known there as a musician and composer. And his most important output, how he came to Istanbul, I will tell you in a minute, but his most important musical output is actually he wrote down, recorded in writing, more than 500 Ottoman Turkish songs using European notation. And it's very important for today's Turkish musicology. And actually in Bodleian, it turns out you have one little example of his musical writing. That was how he worked. He used European notation. My ear written down some music, and it's the only Turkish music, Ottoman Turkish music, is the only music in the Middle Eastern musical tradition that has written practical notations from that time, because it was transmitted, and it is transmitted today by oral tradition. So it's very, very special, and this is how Ufki is best known in Turkey. However, in Europe, he is best known under his Latin name, Albertus Bobovius. And he is best known as interpreter and scholar, or maybe early Orientalist, intermediary between Turkish, like Eastern and Western cultures. His most important works are, for example, translation of the Bible into Turkish, one of the first. Actually, this translation is used now in Turkey. Like in 19th century, they took his 17th century translation of the Bible to prepare contemporary Bible in Turkish. Other things, let me just check to not to forget anything. Translation of the Book of Common Prayer, commissioned by Englishmen from who were in Istanbul. So he translated into Turkish Book of Common Prayer. Then he translated into Turkish a great book of languages, Janua Lingvarum Reserata of Comenius. That was a very important Latin grammar. And most of those manuscripts are either in London or in Paris or in Leiden or in Glasgow. So his works are all over Europe because he had very broad network of contacts from among European diplomats, scholars, missionaries. 17th century Istanbul is very vibrant, and for example, England is starting to have more and more merchant contacts with Ottomans. So he was a man who in Istanbul was very much known, and each new European coming to Istanbul would be pointed to him, go to him. If you need some manuscripts, like Oriental manuscripts, go to him. He will find a man who will find a man who will find it for you. And actually here, when I was, those 2 months, I was looking into Hyde collection, Marsh collection, Gaudius collection, all those 17th century Orientalists collection. And it was interesting to feel and see that a lot of those Oriental manuscripts were probably bought via this intermediarship of Bobovius. So that was quite lovely. Here in Oxford, you have very unique collection of his linguistics-related works, because he was also a teacher, not only of customs, but also of Turkish language. He was one of those, he called himself actually Magister Lingvarum. And in the sources, it's He spoke 17 languages, but probably he didn't speak them, right? But in his works, it seems that he knew at least passively around 10, so impressive anyway. So let me show you the manuscripts. If you could, Elena, please change the cover, because those are his notes. But actually, this is your biggest gem here in Bodleian. This is Grammatica Turcicolatina, finished in 1666 and dedicated to Henry Denton, who was chaplain at the English embassy in Istanbul back then. And it seems that Bobovius written this grammar. It's Turkish grammar written in Latin, in this very didactic, it's like a textbook. It looks very modern, I would say. And if we can change one more page, so you can see that it's in Latin. And let me just find the first with the text. Yeah, it's in Latin, but you can see also a lot of Ottoman Turkish script, which is based on Arabic script. So it's very interesting to see Latin and Arabic script on one page. Later on, he used it while teaching, for example, Thomas Smith and 5 more chaplains of the English embassy in Istanbul. So it seems like most of his friends were English back then, and this is why you have all those manuscripts here. The second very important manuscript is Marsh 107, and this is a Heptaglot dictionary. We don't know why he has written it yet. This is something that we will be looking into for sure. Heptaglot dictionary, it's Latin, Greek, Turkish, Chagatay, Armenian, Ruthenian, and Wallachian, which is like Old Moldavian. So my thought was at first, when I heard about this work, that it was his, like notebook, because he was using all those languages when he was interpreter to the Sultan. But it's too clear and clean to be a notebook, so we don't know why he has written it. Another gem is autograph of his treatise about Islam, which later on was printed by Thomas Hyde in Itinera Mundi here in Oxford in 1691. Here you have autograph of that work. It was very influential, one of the first treatises about Islam written for Europeans. And it is unusual because Bobovius was bicultural, so he was he was educated back in Lviv, then he was taken by the Tatars to Istanbul like a prisoner of war. He ended up at the court of Sultan Ibrahim I and then Mehmed IV. He spent 20 years in the court, Ottoman court, as a musician. And then when he left the service, he stayed in Istanbul until the end of his life. So he was bicultural. He never forgot his culture, and then the second culture he was brought into in Ottoman palace was like superimposed on his culture, but not completely changed. So we can see it in his works that he's surprisingly, for that period of time, objective. He never says things like Muslims are barbarians, and it's very unusual for the time, as I'm sure you know. And the 18th century was even worse about this, like racial things. So he's very much showing respect to both his cultures. And the last but not least, actually my favorites, those tiny papers right here, are his private notes. He was very, in his works, he was very, he wouldn't tell much about himself. So he's very like enigma. And this is why I started to work on his biography first, because there are a lot of hearsays, and from the 17th century to today's scholarship, people are like saying things about him. And I was like, I would like to find out if it's actually true, it has any sources to support those claims. And some of them has those support, some of them not. This is my book about him that I wrote because I was researching the Polish part of his life. So I was partly successful. I can just show you. It's written in Polish, but it has a lot of images. You can just run through it. So here, for example, is a document from cathedral in Lviv, which may be his birth certificate from 1607. So that would support this hearsay that he was born at the beginning of the 17th century. And then about how he ended up in Turkey, we don't truly know. He says two versions. One was that he was just taken by the Tatars who invaded eastern part of Poland, Lithuania, but some other sources of the 17th century claim that he was taken prisoner during Venice wars. So he was really kind of mysterious. We don't know those things. So this is why I also came here to see and with hope that maybe some, little paper will slip out of those manuscripts. Sadly, it didn't, but who knows, there's still like London, Paris, Leiden, all of those places. And yeah, I think that's all I would like to say. Thank you so much.